Sinai, remote and inaccessible, was a place an ordinary person hardly ever dreamed of seeing. With an awesome name, invoking God, the commandments, and wars ancient and modern, Sinai was a symbol. But now one could go there by bus on what might well be the oddest bus trip in the world, the 5-day tour of Israel's Eged line. It's as though the elements from which the earth was made were first assembled here in their pure state. Rock, desert, and on 3 sides, the sea. The trip starts at 6:30 a.m. from Tel Aviv, near the luxurious Dan Hotel there in the background. But this excursion is not for lovers of luxury. It was a good idea, I'd been told, to stock up on lemon drops for the desert heat. The tourists, French, Swiss, English, American, Italian, Canadian, Israeli. The lead driver was Uzi, and if the name sounds familiar, Uzi is also the name of Israel's homemade little machine gun. These doughty Eged drivers kept the settlement roads open during years of terror and war. The second driver, Danny, took on some weapons. Vehicles in Sinai must travel at least 2 together and carry arms. Who'll be responsible for a gun, Danny asked, and got an Israeli war veteran, now studying in the States, back home for a visit. We followed the paved seacoast road, the path of the Roman Via Maris. Roughly parallel are 2 more surfaced roads through central Sinai, also reaching the Suez Canal. The 1967 battle lines were on these 3 highways. Just here where the central road reaches the water, across from Ismailia, is the Bitter Lake area between the upper and lower sections of the Suez Canal. And it is this very area that is accepted as the crossing point of the tribes of Israel. The bottom was a marshland before the canal was built, and even today, we are told, a tank from the last war is sunk in the mud. Here the Israelites might have crossed on foot, while the Egyptian pursuers with their heavy chariots went under. Farther along the canal, we came opposite the Egyptian city of Suez. There have been heavy exchanges of shell fire since our trip, and this route was later closed, with the buses taking an inner road. Having turned left along the canal, we continued along the seashore from where it emptied into the Red Sea, or the Reed Sea, which is the correct translation of the Hebrew Yam Suf. Soon after Suez is Ayun Musa, the Waters of Moses, as the local Arabs have for centuries called this place. It was a stopover for foot pilgrims on their way to the Muslim shrine in Jerusalem, the Dome of the Rock, believed to be where Abraham brought Isaac for sacrifice. The wall sign tells the weary pilgrims, next time, take a plane. And just after Ayun Musa, if we look directly inland, we see another possible Mount Moses. Called Sim Bishel, this one is considered the logical choice by famous archaeologists such as Yigael Yadin. This young American rabbi is a grandson of the Zionist pioneer who revived the Hebrew language, Eliezer ben Yehuda. Midway down the Reed Sea coast are oil fields now operated by the Israelis. These storage tanks were damaged, some destroyed, by Egyptians using Russian katushkas. But tankers stand by to carry the product to Eilat, whence it is piped to oil refineries in Haifa. There are 3 oil fields in Sinai producing some 10,000 tons a year, about twice what Israel consumes. The rest is sold. The base camp is here at Abu Rudeis. These houses had been built for Italian oil field engineers. There are dormitories now with cots and makeshift showers. And there's a kibbutz-style mess hall. In the morning, we get into smaller buses for the rough ride up to the monastery of St. Catherine, the most exciting objective of our trip. We turn inland, following the dry bed of Wadi Faran. This is the pathway of the flash floods that bring down the winter rain, water from the Sinai range. There's no actual road, but only a series of stone markers replaced every year. Dust is heavy. And on every trip, at least one bus gets stuck. Uzi bellows for help. Meanwhile, a passing Bedouin takes advantage to ask for a drink of water. The law of the desert is observed. If anyone asks for a drink, you share what you have. So he gets soda pop. And he's on his way. His transportation never gets stuck in the sand. But we're still here. The passengers push. The second bus pulls from behind, and our caravan comes unstuck. There are several oases in the wadi where the Israelites could have camped and where Bedouins still live. This halt is at a most ancient road junction. Another valley branches off here called Wadi Katab, the Valley of the Writing. For when they camped at this junction, cameleers passed their time scratching pictographs and later writings on the rock surface. The link between picture writing and alphabetical writing is found here in the Proto-Sinaitic inscriptions. A warrior, a pregnant camel. My son Mikhael wanted to see more. Anyone familiar with the Hebrew alphabet can recognize letters still written in the same way. We have a refreshment stop at the village khan. The tourists visit the little farm behind the khan. Baby goats. And the same animal is still a good luck omen, fixed above the doorpost to avert the evil eye. Or was it to tell the angel of death to pass by? Pigeons, like the partridges that fell from the sky to feed the Israelites. These people might be part of the Exodus. Doubtless they did not ceaselessly wander the desert for 40 years, but the people spread probably to every such oasis as this, and their numbers in reality may not have been greater than the number of Bedouin the area supports today. Just now, there is a crash program of research being carried on throughout the entire Sinai by teams of scholars from the Hebrew University, ethnologists, geologists, archaeologists, botanists. Water resources, mineral resources, clues in tribal names, in place names, in folk customs, all are being scrutinized as never before. There are pipes now and barrels and tin cans, but the water comes from the same source as in biblical times. Here, too, at the foot of Mount Sarbel, there is an archaeological dig, and here Israeli relics were discovered. The tiny white dots are liquid globules exuded on the twigs of the tamarisk, mostly in July and August. This resin is scraped off even today by the Bedouin and boiled into a sweet gum that they call man. I tasted a globule, like honey. Perhaps in ancient times the exudation was far more plentiful and dried on the branches, then fell to the ground to be gathered as manna. Manna and also matzah. The everyday Arab bread called pita is simply made from flour and water quickly baked on a hot iron cover or, as in the old days, in the ashes of a fire. And they baked their bread in haste, for they had no time to tarry. The flour today comes, as one may see on the sack, from U.S. surplus. It is delivered to the Bedouin tribes by the Israelis. This is much the way our popular pizza is made, and pita and pizza are virtually the same word. It tasted like matzah, except that it was warm. It's used for dipping, and who knows, this may yet become fashionable at cocktail parties in Manhattan. A medical clinic is conducted at Faran and in other Bedouin centers. With a Bedouin helper, an Israeli doctor binds an injured foot. And in the next room, a class in physiology is conducted. This is a 10-day course. Students who are already able to read are selected from the tribes. Basic health and nutrition information, signs of disease, and first aid are taught. Since the course is conducted by the Army, the boys are put into uniform during the 10 days. The Bedouins say that never before has anything like this course been done for them. Deeper into Wadi Faran, the mountains turn from limestone to granite. The eternal winds have carved the sandstone into extraordinary forms that may have suggested to caravaneers long ago an architecture for Oriental temples. Yet even here there is animal life and bird life. The kinship of natural forms, even between the free-flying birds and the elemental, immovable stones, accents the primeval, mysterious suggestiveness that grows on one in this area. A research botanist from Jerusalem who knows every crevice in these rocks remarked to me, "What does it matter which mountain is really the Mount of Moses? Whichever mountain you climb in Sinai, you feel the presence of God." Higher up, the Wadi opens into a circular area which is called the Valley of the Golden Calf. On this hillock, where the little tower stands, Moses is said to have come upon his priests worshipping the golden idol. Directly behind is the monastery of St. Catherine at the base of Mount Moses. The monastery was completed in the year 565 by the Byzantine Emperor Justinian, though the site as a Christian retreat dates back a few centuries earlier. Holy men lived in caves in this area. They were attacked by marauders, and to protect them, Justinian had this fortress built. Though added to and altered, the structure is said to be the oldest continuously inhabited building in the entire world. Within the courtyard is a mosque as well as a church. What is little realized is that St. Catherine's is a shrine to Muslims as well as to Christians, while built on a Jewish holy site. This was once the only entrance to which visitors and supplies were raised by ropes. These cannon guarded it. Now there is a heavy door built low so that no horseman could invade. The mosque and church are in the center of a charming whitewashed courtyard. The monks take loving care of their flowers. There is a fresh water spring far below called the Well of Moses. And it is impressive to feel that this cool water may have refreshed Moses himself and the Israelites. This is traditionally called the burning bush, though our botanists declared it is not a plant indigenous to the area. The monk gave some of the burning bush seeds to a visitor from New Orleans. Dormitories are in the cloisters. There are cots for 130 visitors in one wing, while the monks occupy the other wing. Only 8 monks are in residence. About a dozen Bedouin are employed to keep up the hostel. This monastery belongs to the Greek Orthodox faith. This is known as the altar of the burning bush. The church and library contain treasures second only to those of the Vatican. The collection of 2,000 icons is the best in the world, covering the entire period of icon painting from the 5th century to the present. The Virgin enthroned dates back to the building of the monastery in the 6th century. St. Catherine herself. In the refectory are frescoes dating from a later period and including Moses with the tablets of the law. On the rear wall, a fanciful melange from St. George to the Last Supper. The library has 3,000 volumes in a dozen languages, including Ethiopic. ancient gold-embroidered vestments, and Bibles that were among the oldest known scriptures until the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. The most precious, the Codex Sinaiticus, was borrowed by a scholar a century ago and later sold to the British Museum. Still, the manuscripts and illuminations remaining here are incomparable. This Christ is among the most perfectly preserved. The Virgin and Child dates from 1200 A.D., and a Princeton authority calls this 7th century St. Peter the most beautiful icon in existence. In this alcove, cross and crescent, strangely joined, are worshipped together. The monastery is named for St. Catherine of Alexandria, martyred in the 4th century for protesting the persecution of Christians to the Roman emperor. Legend has it that angels carried her body to these mountains. St. Catherine's is most widely known perhaps for its ossuary. As there is little burial soil in the compound, the monks are placed for 2 years in the tiny cemetery, and their bones are then removed to this vault. The remains of thousands of monks, everyone who ever lived here across 14 centuries, are enshrined. The abbots are separated, and the bishops. And these are the remains of the founder of the monastery, Father Stephan, who died around 580 A.D. The keeper of the keys awaits. Father Gregorianus supervises the century-old custom of bread distribution to the Bedouin of the area. At first, this was done to keep them from attacking, at times to keep them from starving, and in more recent times as a tradition, although they still liked the bread. Despite the continuous influx of visitors, the monks are able to preserve their area of quietude. And as evening falls, there is a time of contemplation. At 3 in the morning, when the monks arise for their devotions, we are awakened for the pilgrimage to the top of Mount Moses. It is best to avoid the heat of the high sun. A few camels are loaded with water and refreshments. The camels set out. and the people. Camels go only to the halfway rest stop. One tourist tried a ride. This is a junior high school principal from Riverdale, New York, with his wife on their vacation. This little girl with her brother is part of a bus driver's family. Here are the mother and father on a proverbial busman's holiday. Incidentally, this entire 5-day excursion costs only $75, camp and board included. The big men get the most tired. It is a 3-hour climb, not difficult but arduous enough. Not one tourist chose to stay behind. Some were in their 60s, and one American on a previous trip was 75. The Sinai Range. Far away on the eastern side is the Gulf of Eilat. The Israelites eventually passed that way on their journey around the land of Edom to the Promised Land. On the peak, there is a chapel and a mosque. God's mountain is the synagogue. One is an Israeli newspaper man, one a student from America. In the Sinai, you'll feel that every grain of sand, every stone, every bit of vegetation in the desert is the burning bush, if man only chooses to listen to the Word of God.